Welcome to this Let's Accelerate. My name is Sarah and I'm here with Levent, and we are both from Bosch Management Consulting. Today we have two special guests from Africa, Markus Thill, the president of Robert Bosch in Africa, and Mary Mindo, responsible for the business development in Africa and also the hub leader for Grow. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. So we will start with a question to you, Markus. Why is Africa a place for innovation? And what is the main difference in innovating in Africa compared with innovating in other areas of the globe?
It's a very complex question. The first thing that I would say is Africa is a continent with the youngest population around the world. And young people are usually more inquisitive, possibly than older people. Now, I'm generalizing a lot. But I suppose that my first physics professor has always said, if you want to innovate in physics, go to kindergartens, because these people still have a mind which is absolutely clean and are not prejudiced in a certain direction. So the first thing is Africa has got a very young population. The second thing is, because on the one hand, it's a very informal economy, still to a large degree, and a lot of people need to fend for themselves. So that creates entrepreneurs. And to a certain degree, they have no choice but to be an entrepreneur. And the third topic, and that's also here currently being in Kenya, the mobile money, and not necessarily mobile money, but cheap and efficient way of transferring money was invented here in East Africa. That's only a few of the examples why I believe Africa is a continent of innovation and can be and will continue to be a continent of innovation. What is different in Africa is very much related also to the three things that I've just mentioned. And I think the key topic is that we are working here more or less from not a brown field, but a green field, because there is very often nothing. And there is no fixed line in most of Africa. There's only mobile phones. And there's also very often not smartphones, but feature phones. So you need to make do with feature phones. And so you need to make do with very little to achieve the biggest impact. And so we don't have the big advantage of maybe mature markets or many other regions in the world where you have an abundance of something. You need to create innovation with little. Let me just finish with saying, on the other hand, it is also cheap. Mm-hmm. So cheap and little can also be possibly sometimes faster. But that's maybe also for Mary to more give an opinion on.
I completely agree with Markus. The only thing I would add is regarding the people. So unlike other markets where probably you could design for various segments, I think here we tend to see the mass market is a lower income point. And so this is something especially we have to think about as product developers very early on, that price almost has to guide you, affordability, and there is money to be made, but it's at this part of the market.
Yeah. Can I just maybe dig down in that? So I think what we also learned when we know each other from the hot water project in Africa called Kamin in Kenya. So when we get started that project, we had to cope with facing a lot of prejudices about Africa, because it comes from actually lack of knowledge about the market, especially in corporate organizations as Bosch. So as we have. We don't have that many stuff across the continent. So, for instance, in our case, we says, why you want to sell hot water in Africa? Isn't it already hot there? So it's not cold there. Or so the people can they afford that? Do they have income? And things like that, which really are challenging in the first place. And I'm pretty sure that you're also facing the same challenges, the same kind of I would say stupid questions. So how do you cope with those ones? How do you still convince people that Africa is really, Markus, you already say that is kind of the youngest population on the global scale. So, but how do you still cope with those challenges, and how do you persuade people still investing in Africa?
I would start on the ground level, and then I'm sure Markus can give us a really wholesome perspective from his perspective. I think a lot of it, I do agree there are knowledge gaps, both in corporate institutions and even among NGOs trying to do things. So, I mean, the first challenge, luckily, the internet has really democratized information and knowledge. And I mean, I will give you a funny example. It's not very funny, but a few years ago, around 7 to 10 years ago, there was a terror attack in one of the shopping malls in Nairobi, which was a devastating incident. But it was interesting because when we went online, people from the Western world were more surprised that we have such sophisticated shopping malls, not that there was actually something really bad that had happened there. So sometimes you're really coming from that point. But then again, I would say some tools like user research, which is something that sometimes was overlooked. People could sit down and develop a product from A to Z and then take it to the market then. Those have helped where you can really interact with the user, with the ground reality, even before you start creating your own hypothesis. So I could say sometimes, especially when you're that uncertain, it helps when people have some structures or processes to guide their innovation process. It helps when ideation is inclusive. It helps when teams also have members that are diverse because I can bring in perspectives that are just top of the head examples that I experienced growing up that somebody maybe sitting in Stuttgart could not relate to. So I could say in this way, it helps us have a very good and balanced picture. I think Markus can now comment on the higher level.
Yeah, Markus,
because I'm sure he's
Markus, you've been like the ambassador of Africa inside Bosch, and for sure you have to give the voice of what about Mary is just mentioning, to justify and to explain a reality that for many countries is not so directly visible. So how do you do that, and what are the main challenges for you?
Very difficult question. I mean, our challenge is to a certain degree prejudices, and prejudices you probably only can really get rid of if people come to Africa. So that's why one of our means also to convince people about Africa is to bring them to Africa, not only for a visit of 1 or 2 days, but maybe for a week or 2 or 3 weeks. And then very often already the perception changes. That is one element. The second element is always to continue saying the same messages that we've been saying over the last few years and repeating them. Maybe they're also our perception of Africa has also changed over the last 6 years, so we might need to adapt them slightly. But in general, the ground or the background noise is always the same. And the third thing, and that's what I would say internally, in particular, and I'll just jump to externally in a minute. Internally, the best way to market Africa is sustainable, profitable. That's why us as the Africa team, that's what we are really working on, is to really show that we've now really learned how the market works. And maybe we've done a lot of mistakes at the beginning, and then also there's the Bosch system, and SAP POE, and this process and that process. And we've adapted a few things. Also in PT, for example, that we now can indirectly sell power tools with cash, against cash. That's unheard of at Bosch. It is not us directly, but indirectly. And so we found ways. It's taken a lot of time. And then if we have these type of successes, also just like this today, that is a little puzzle piece. That is the Bosch internal topic. And we as Bosch are also very much involved with the African Association of Automotive Manufacturers, the German African Business Association. We are working with the G20 Compact for Africa, with WTO. So not only Bosch, but many other, or quite a few other multinationals also. And we need to change the image for Africa. And I would always say it's even in the interest of Europe to change it. Yeah. Because we can't ignore our neighboring continents, and it's maybe 1/3 of the world population in 2050. So either Africa will stay poor, or it will also move up the ladder in terms of becoming wealthier. And in essence, I think that's also what we are about as Bosch, to improve the life and livelihoods of everyone around the world.
That's actually a very good point, Markus. So, like, as you also stated, that there are circumstances, of course, that are different. They are different, way different than as we know it from I would say, the Western world, even though I don't like that expression. But there are differences, in the power grid, in the availability of resources, and so forth. Maybe a level of education. But isn't that the challenge also for business model innovation, as we call it, that name, is also the challenge to really adapt to that market and come up with ideas which are really serving those people? Because at the end of the day, we have a lot of people out there who have also the same needs, we have the same aspirations in their world, and we know also from very good examples out there who did that. I'm just want to call here a company which both of you know, Copa from Kenya, which really went out there, as also started as a startup, and then were really kind of highly successful in providing those families with electricity, where there was no power grid there. And also the other example, what I know from my visits to Kenya, is Safaricom. So even in the remotest villages, you see all the buildings with the green signatures on them, because that is the power of the company who is investing in the communication. There is for doing business, and is that profitable business also in Africa. But we as Bosch, are we still kind of be afraid to get to that level, to do that? And why is it? Why shouldn't we learn from those people, or even not partner up with those people who are already successful on the market, Markus?
I know a lot of private equity funds and also venture capital funds in Africa. And one thing which is different to other regions is that they're very often evergreen funds. So they're not the normal 7 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 or 10 plus 2 venture funds. And the reason when I always ask them, there were some very famous, very successful funds that just told me it takes longer in Africa to find the right business model. And when I did a study internally, because people were asking how long does it take for these startups in East Africa, whether it's M-Pesa and Copper and a few other ones, how much cash do they burn until they're profitable, and how long does it take, and how often do they actually change their business model? There's a few interesting Harvard Business Review articles on this. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing is that most of the successful startups here take 2 or 3 or 4 times longer than elsewhere, possibly because they need to change even more the business model, and they need to struggle with the infrastructure and all the rest. Mm-hmm. So the topic here is they burn through $50 or $100 million until they find the right business model, and it takes 5 years. Mm-hmm. And the question here is, I don't think that right now we have that type of model within Bosch, or to a certain degree maybe with Grow. We could now try to get such a model going for Africa. But it will not be also an easy journey. It will also be a lot of learnings for us with Grow in Africa, because Grow in Africa will be different. Grow in North America and Europe, maybe similar to Grow in India, but we'll need to see. Africa is much more diverse to a certain degree, and it's much bigger just geographically. So that is the big challenge, that one needs to be honest with oneself in Africa. That it really will take longer, and it might not cost in the end as much as a startup in Europe and the US. It might still be cheaper, but you need to be patient.
Mm-hmm. Yes, actually, it was very pleasure. So we all are in this call. We were working together for a project, and it was a pleasure to work also with you, Mary. And we were in fact trying to partner with some of these companies. So, Mary, from your perspective, what is the key characteristic that is missing for big companies to succeed in the African market?
I would thank you so much for that question. And I think there's a lot of even emotional attachment to answering the question, just because we really have lived the experience of having a startup that has a lot of potential, but also running into some challenges that are related more into our internal conditions rather than the market. I could completely agree with Markus when it comes to the kind of patient capital that's required for Africa. You will often find that there are some infrastructure gaps that you have to fill yourself. And usually the people who last long and are more patient through this are the ones who reap. I could say as well, in terms of the product, this is something that a lot of companies are not willing to look at themselves internally and really understand that we almost have to sit down and understand the customer and design something for them. Definitely, it's not a cheap process. It takes a bit of time. But sometimes you find with an entry point of the kind of income levels that we have, you could not easily transfer one to one. Sometimes you find the product you want to enter the market with is over engineered. So it has some functions that are not deemed necessary because people are already used to being very lean, or sometimes it just does not have the infrastructure, maybe internet or a grid connection to work with. And so sometimes the process might take you back a bit, but just developing specifically to suit the market that you're working for, that I could say is also a gap. And then processes. So big corporations, for obvious reasons which make sense, have to have structures in place to really manage a big workforce, to manage their process. And so often you will need sort of basic rules where you do the minimum, but you can be able to test and change your mind and get in and out of the mistake quite fast. Hopefully this is something Grow really will give as an advantage to startups, which is something we found we struggled with. So you're trying to think different. I think there's a quote I came across today when also going through the talks, that culture usually eats strategy for breakfast. So sometimes I felt like that's what happens. There's a certain culture, you have a plan, but yeah, you keep going back and forth.
All right. Thank you, Mary and Markus, for your answers. So now I would like to start a sentence completion challenge to you, and I will start with Markus. Corporate innovations in Africa will only be successful if
we are patient and engage with the local culture.
Great. Mary, the next major Bosch innovation in Africa will be?
Ooh.
You can say in an area of.
Yeah, that's okay. We'll be in the area of, I could say IoT. So that's, I know, wide. I'm casting a wide net because it has a range of applications. But yeah, IoT that's really been brought and tailored down to the African user.
Make it an example because it's kind of a buzzword. So what exactly what you mean?
I think Bosch teams will unlock a certain usage of, say, sensors, which we are very advanced and well technically versed with, and really identify a market gap and deploy a proper product that's well priced for the African market and the African user.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Right. Now, Markus, my personal contribution for innovation in Africa is?
Supporting Mary.
So then, Mary, my personal contribution for innovation in Africa is?
One, being an evangelist, making sure that everyone understands innovation is not just if you're in the project, it's really a daily process of opening your eyes and challenging the system sometimes, as well as really supporting, transferring everything I've learned and everything I will learn to projects and really making sure that they push through and persevere and hopefully emerge as a unicorn or two.
One or two, wow.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. So we hope that with this podcast, this was also our contribution to make the innovation in Africa more visible for everyone that is listening to us. Thank you so much. This was our Let's Accelerate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.